Wisdom is better than wealth. In some ways, this is a continuation of yesterday's story about Solomon the wise king, wiser than anybody who had ever lived and probably wealthier too. And he, the wise king, knew the power of wisdom. Our daily reading comes from Proverbs chapter 16, and this lesson can be found throughout Proverbs, beginning in chapter 3, but especially here in verse 16 of chapter 16, which reads, "How much better to get wisdom than gold, to get insight rather than silver." Why is wisdom more valuable than gold? Have you ever asked yourself that question? Would you rather be poor, for example, and have lots of wisdom, or be wealthy with very little wisdom? I think it's obvious to see when we look around the world what the more popular choice has been. The ability to be resourceful and make wise decisions has repercussions far beyond our pocketbooks, however, or our notoriety and our fame. As I'm sure some of you are saying, why not have both? I think that's a great question to ask. Think of the value of building your life on Jesus, the solid rock. Think of what Jesus says about the wise and the foolish builder. Jesus says the foolish builder is like the one who went and built his house on the sand, and when the storm came, it flattened that house, which was no more. And the wise builder is like the one who builds his house on the rock, and the storms came, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it stood firm. Jesus says, if you're wise and you build your house on my teachings, you'll be like the person who built your house on the rock. And Jesus is the rock, our firm foundation that we can rely upon. Let's not be foolish building our lives on the promises of the world that can never provide the kind of fulfillment that Jesus talks about. And remember that Jesus says to store up for ourselves treasures in heaven, where moth or rust can't come through and destroy or steal, and thieves can't break through and steal. Nothing can take away the value of good character or this kind of wise investment. Ask yourself, in your relationships, are you living more like a person who has much monetary wealth and little wisdom, or more like a person who has the wisdom of a heart filled with love, no matter what your bank account says? I know, as the word says, that when you trust in God, when you lean into God with your first fruits and with your joy, God will fill your barns to bursting so that you don't have enough room for all the blessings that God longs to pour out. God wants us to give the blessing of having enough monetarily, but even more the blessing of good character. May that reminder be with you and empower you throughout the weekend to come.